Yo, what's going on everyone? It's me, it's Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day and welcome to today's Pokemon GO discussion video. Alright, so a couple of days ago, I released a video talking about the 5 reasons why Niantic and Pokemon GO are going to continue to exist well into the future. I talked about all the reasons why Pokemon GO has a lot of longevity and all the things that are going well for Pokemon GO that's going to contribute to it becoming an everlasting game. However, that's not necessarily 100% true. There are factors that could kill off Pokemon GO, and that is going to be the point of this video. I'm going to be talking about the 5 ways that Niantic and Pokemon GO could end up failing in the future. The first reason is going to be really obvious, and that is of course revenue. If Niantic and Pokemon GO see a huge dip in revenue, or they continuously bleed out revenue every year, there's going to be a point where Pokemon GO is no longer going to be profitable, and they're essentially going to fail. I think no matter how big the Pokemon IP is, the only other thing that is bigger than Pokemon is of course players' wallets. If people are not spending money in Pokemon GO, then essentially the game is going to die out. Even for myself, I've kind of gone free to play over the past couple of years, and the reason for that is because of course, the remote raid pass nerf. And I have to tell you, I'm still getting a lot out of this game, and I think a lot of other players are following suit. Like, you do not have to spend money on getting raid passes and incubators to get the most out of this game. So I think there is a huge possibility that a majority of players will just simply stop spending money in the game. And if Niantic continues to make some bad decisions regarding the game mechanics of Pokemon GO, then eventually players are going to get fed up and they're just no longer going to spend any money. Ultimately, what Niantic needs to watch out for is that they need to keep the game rewarding for those who are spending money. It is a free-to-play game, and it's meant to reward players for spending money. That's essentially how all free-to-play games are made. They're meant to be played for free, but you could pay to get some shortcuts and some advantages. And for those advantages, Pokemon GO is kind of designed in a way where you do not get that many advantages when you spend money. In fact, there are a lot of times where I've spent a lot of money in Pokemon GO, and I felt like there was a lot of buyer's remorse. Like, I would be aiming for a certain shiny, or I would be aiming for a 100% IV, and I just simply would not get it. And I think this is something that Niantic needs to work on when it comes to Pokemon GO. I think it wouldn't hurt the game if there were certain mechanics that were bad luck protection. Like, there are plenty of free-to-play games where they have gacha mechanics and they have a lot of random number generator mechanics, but they also have bad luck protection. So for all those people who are spending boatloads of money, they still will eventually get what it is that they're spending for. And I think Niantic lacks a lot of those mechanics. So if I were to give some constructive feedback, I think there should be some bad luck protection for stuff like IVs or when it comes to shinies. If you're doing so many raids, then eventually you should be almost guaranteed a shiny. I think that would be something really cool for Pokemon GO. Alright, so the next thing that could potentially kill Pokemon GO off is, of course, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. I mentioned this as a huge advantage that Pokemon GO has in my last video, but in this video, I want to talk about why that could potentially be the reason why Pokemon GO ends up failing. I think a lot of people are very familiar with how the Pokemon Company works. They basically have kind of like a more traditional mindset when it comes to game development. So they often do not listen to the community. They often cut corners when it comes to certain Pokemon games, and I can see a lot of that bleeding over into Pokemon GO. And on top of that, they essentially have the game in lock and key. They cannot allow for a lot of different updates without getting their approval. And I think because of that, Niantic is essentially hamstrung every single time. So I think that could be a huge problem for Pokemon GO moving forward. I think if there are some positive changes that need to be made, the Pokemon Company might essentially axe it, and because of that, Pokemon GO might end up dying. But on top of that, of course, they have full ownership of the Pokemon IP, and at any point, they could take that away from Niantic. Kind of related to the first point that I made, if Niantic starts to lose a lot of money, then the Pokemon Company could essentially revoke that license. So yeah, there's a lot of different questionable factors that could contribute to the downfall of Pokemon GO from Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, and that is something that we as players need to be aware of. Now, the third reason why Pokemon Go could potentially fail is, of course, Niantic continuously fostering a bad relationship with the Pokemon Go community. And this is a tricky one because when it comes to the Pokemon Go community, there is a whole variety of different players, and a lot of them tend to lean positive. Like, there are certain players out there who play the game a lot more casually, and they're not necessarily going to complain about a lot of the things that we as players who are on social media are going to continuously complain about. But at the same time, those complaints are valid. There's a lot of problems with Pokemon Go from a gameplay point of view as well as a monetization point of view, and if a lot of those complaints reach a tipping point, then there's a high chance that a lot of players will end up falling away from the game. I think a huge notable example is, of course, Clash Royale. That was one of the biggest mobile games in the market for a very long time, but it eventually fell off because they had a very bad reputation with the community. The community of players were constantly complaining about a lot of different issues, but Supercell completely ignored a lot of it, and they added a bunch of mechanics that were just very convoluted and were causing players to feel very burnt out. And I could definitely see Pokemon Go going that way. In fact, I feel like they have been going that way for the past several years. So that is very concerning because, like I said, there could be a tipping point coming where a bunch of players will just stop playing the game, especially the whales. Now, the fourth reason is going to be something that I think is very unlikely, but it is, of course, another pandemic. I think the first time there was a pandemic, Niantic did react very well. They added a bunch of mechanics that kept the game alive, like notably the remote raid pass. But I think if there were to be a second pandemic, I'm not necessarily sure if the Pokemon Go community will continue playing the game. I think ever since the last pandemic, there has been a lot of attempts to make the game more friendly for exploration because, yeah, we're no longer locked down at home. So Niantic has been implementing a lot of features like party play, routes, different things like that in order to get players to go out and play. But that in turn creates a huge problem because a vast majority of what is fun in Pokemon Go right now involves going out and playing outside. So if we go through a lockdown again, essentially a huge chunk of a lot of the updates that Niantic has been releasing over the past couple of years are going to be completely nullified. Like, you're no longer going to be able to get the benefits of routes. I don't know how they could pull that off, but yeah, these are huge problems that Niantic needs to worry about, and hopefully we just won't have another pandemic. I think the entire world is completely traumatized by COVID-19, so hopefully this won't happen again, but who knows? That is something that is completely out of our control, and I think ultimately that is a huge factor for what could cause the downfall of Pokemon Go. Alright, and finally, the fifth and final reason that I wanted to talk about regarding how Pokemon Go could die off is also a little bit obvious, but also highly unlikely, and that is the rise of a big competitor. I do not think Niantic is one of those games that would have been successful if there were a bunch of other AR games on the market. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to Pokemon Go and Niantic, it's essentially the only company that is doing AR gameplay. But there have been many attempts over the past several years. And I feel like if any of those other games would have popped off, I think Pokemon Go would have been in huge trouble. But that's not to say that other attempts are going to be made in the future. If another game studio develops a really good AR game, then I feel like a lot of players that play Pokemon Go are going to jump ship. Of course, Niantic has a lot of advantages, like I mentioned in the last video, notably the Pokemon IP, but still, there is a possibility that another game studio could develop an AR game that could completely destroy Pokemon Go. It's definitely a possibility, and there are certainly games out there that have seen that happen to them. So yeah, Pokemon Go could potentially fail in the future for any of these 5 reasons, but I really do think that it's okay to be optimistic. Pokemon Go is still doing pretty well, and like I said in the last video, there's a lot of things going for it, but we still have to be very cautious because at any point in the future, Pokemon Go could die off. It's not going to be completely foolproof from any of these 5 reasons. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. What are the reasons why you think Pokemon Go could eventually die off? Or do you think that's not going to be possible because of just how big Pokemon is? Let me know those thoughts down below, and let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you ended up enjoying it and found it to be insightful, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And also don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And real quick, I want to give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to play Pokemon Go with me, the best way you could do so is by joining my Patreon. Patreon. The reason for that is because for all of my Patreon members, I add them to my Pokemon Go friends list. So when it comes to remote raids or the friendship system, if you want to interact with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way, you can do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula, and I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow. Alright, and that's going to be it for this video. I am Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.